So my name is Nazar. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Soul. We are the leading AI-powered platform to help anyone, anywhere, live a more purposeful spiritual life. And before I get into the subject matter of what we're going to cover today, just a little bit about me. I've been a purpose-driven entrepreneur and investor for the last 20 years. 15 years ago or so, I was one of the early people doing social networking stuff. We foolishly, at the time, all of us social networking entrepreneurs, thought that we were building places where we could get together in community, where you could connect with people who aren't in your physical proximity, where you could help people get to know each other better, and what could possibly go wrong by putting everybody together online, right? And so that was somewhat foolish. And then I spent the last 15 years as a VC, as an impact-oriented VC, flying all around the world to emerging markets, investing in companies trying to transform those economies in Africa, in India, in China, in Latin America. In India, 95% of people don't have health insurance, right? In Latin America, 60% of people are unbanked, right? In Africa, there aren't things like UPS where you can ship things around. So how do you find the entrepreneurs who are solving those big problems and help support them? And so that's what I've spent the last 15 years of my life doing. And actually have one of my LPs in the audience here who's come out for this talk too. So purpose is very important to me. And I spent the last 15 years sort of operating at, as Eddie said, sort of the application and the system layer. And a few years ago, I was like, well, look, if purpose matters so much to me, I really need to do something at the foundational level, right? Spirituality has been very important to me personally, and I'll talk more about what spirituality means because it's a misunderstood term. And so founded Soul. Today I'm going to talk about finding purpose in the age of AI. I'm going to talk about the science of purpose and spirituality. There's been a ton of research on this, led by one of my co-founders and other scientists. Going to talk about the stakes of spirituality. Why is purpose and spirituality so critical at this moment in humanity's history? And lastly, going to talk about the tools of purpose. How can anyone, anywhere, build a more purposeful and spiritual life? And by the end of this, I hope you have two big takeaways. Number one is a more complete understanding of why purpose and spirituality is going to become the single most valuable asset that we have as humans over the next 5 years. And number two, a much clearer understanding of how you can more efficiently mine that asset and create more purpose and build more spirituality in your own lives. Does that sound okay? All right, so let's get going. I will start with the science. And the science has really been pioneered by many amazing scientists and researchers, one of whom is Dr. Lisa Miller, one of my co-founders at Soul, and our Chief Science and Wellness Officer. She founded the Spirituality Mind-Body Institute at Columbia, which is the first Ivy League institute that studies the impact of spirituality on the human body and human health. And she's been an award-winning psychology professor at Columbia and Yale and Penn, has written a number of New York Times best-selling books on the topic. And basically, what she and her colleagues have done over the last 15 years is you may remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs from your college psychology class, okay? And so just as a refresher of how this works is at the base of the hierarchy of needs, we have our physiological needs, our physical health, right? These are things like sleep, nutrition, exercise, right? The next layer up, the next layer of importance is our psychological needs. These are things like our own sense of belonging, our own sense of esteem, social connectivity. And the highest level, the most important level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is what is referred to as the spiritual level. This is a psychological term. Spirituality is purely a psychological term. And as Eddie mentioned before, there are other words we use for this. Consciousness, purpose, soul. We're all talking about the same thing, but fundamentally it is the chase. It is the chase for greater purpose and meaning in life. That's what this is. Now, for decades, psychologists have studied the bottom of this pyramid, the bottom two levels. We have thousands and thousands of studies that have helped us understand the impact of sleep and nutrition and exercise on our bodies. We have thousands and thousands of studies that have delved into mental health issues like ADHD and other mental health phenomenon. But really only in the last 15 years have scientists turned their lens to study what happens when people do spiritual or purposeful activity. This is a new area of research, and what they found is pretty breathtaking. And so how did they study this? They basically hooked up humans to MRIs and other types of scanners and measured what happens when somebody does a prayer. What happens when somebody meditates? What happens when somebody does a breathing exercise? When they check their astrology? When they do a daily affirmation? When they attend a religious gathering? When they spend time in nature? When they do an act of compassion to another human being? What happens to your brain and what happens to your body? And what they found is actually shocking, which is that your brain physically changes. It is the equivalent of going to the gym to change your body. So if you go to the gym and you do some curls today, you're going to feel it right away. You're going to get tired right away, right? Tomorrow you're probably going to be sore, and if you keep doing that for a month, you're going to look down and you're going to be like, man, I got some nice biceps, right? And so spiritual activity has the exact same impact on your brain. And so if you do a 1-minute exercise like we did earlier with Gordy, right? Heather's an amazing hugger, by the way. Amazing hugger. We had I felt different after that hug. Did you? Just 1 minute of spiritual activity literally changes you, right? Do it for a few days, and suddenly you're starting to rewire the circuits in your brain. Do it for a few weeks, and suddenly you're actually starting to thicken your parietal cortex. Your brain actually gets thicker in this area, which happens to be the area that, amongst other things, controls our sense of relation to the world around us and to reality around us. It's amazing stuff, right? And so why is this important? Okay, so you're changing your brain, you're doing the spiritual stuff, but like, what kind of impact does that have on my daily life? I'll tell you what kind of impact it has on your daily life. This is absolutely mind-blowing when I learned this, which is that spiritual or purposeful activity or consciousness activity, choose whatever word you want, okay? However you like to think about your own search for purpose and meaning, when you do that activity, you improve your mental health by up to 4x. Let me be specific, okay? You reduce the rate of anxiety and depression by 60%. You reduce the risk of having suicidal ideation or suicide attempts by 50 to 80%. You reduce the rate of addiction and substance abuse by 80%. You transform your mental health by doing purposeful or spiritual activity. Science, okay? Number 2, you transform your emotional health. You become significantly more accepting of yourself. You start to express compassion for yourself. You become a lot more emotionally resilient. You come back from emotional trauma a lot quicker when you do purposeful or spiritual activity. And finally, you transform your social health. We're going through a loneliness pandemic, folks, right? When you do purposeful or spiritual activity, you feel less isolation. You feel more compassion, you feel more belonging, and you're more prompted to engage in social activities and to be altruistic and compassionate to other people, right? Now, this is all research that over the last few years has been widely reported in a lot of research institutions. You know, Harvard, Stanford, a lot of publications are talking about this now. McKinsey's talking about it now. But most shockingly, it's actually being instituted in places that you wouldn't expect. For example, the US Army. Last I checked, the US Army is not a particularly woo-woo or spiritual organization, right? Yet, 2 years ago, they launched the Spiritual Fitness Program. So now every US soldier gets trained in physical fitness, push-ups and run 5 miles a day kind of stuff. Been doing that forever. Mental health regimens, mental fitness regimens, crawl under barbed wire, get mentally tough type of stuff. And now spiritual fitness regimens. Every US soldier meets with a chaplain or chaplains who help them try to understand their own place in the world and their own sense of purpose and who they are. Why is the Army investing in this? Is it because the Army is woo-woo? No. It's because the Army has realized that, we're training a lot of soldiers and we're arming them with quite lethal things. Very important to have people be mentally, emotionally, and socially well while we're doing that. right? It's a productivity effort by the Army. Nonetheless, it is based on the science of how this works, which is what I want you to take away from this, okay? So that all sounds like good news. Wow, I can do spiritual stuff and get a lot healthier. That's great. Unfortunately, the converse is true, is if you don't do spiritual activity, if you do not act purposefully in your life, you are far more likely to be anxious, far more likely to be suicidal, far more likely to be addicted. And unfortunately, the world that we've created for ourselves over the last 20 years is, you've heard reference to the attention economy, I'm sure, right? I prefer to call it the distraction economy. Distraction is the enemy of purpose. And what we've done is we've built a machine around us that bombards us with so much information that we can't process, so many decisions we have to make. It gets weaponized through social media, okay? We've convinced ourselves that liking your friend's post on Instagram is the same as calling them and talking to them or meeting them for a coffee or hugging them. It is not, okay? We've constructed this false world for ourselves that is full of distraction and that lacks any purpose. And not surprisingly, the consequence of this is we see all these headlines that at first seem unrelated. Oh, the epidemic of unhappiness. Oh, the loneliness thing. Oh, the suicide thing. Oh, the teen mental health crisis. These are all these different problems, these different symptoms that science tells us has the same cause. We are living in a far less purposeful, far less spiritual society today than we were a few decades ago, unfortunately, okay? So what is the impact of AI? Before I flip the slide, I just want to say, I'm generally speaking an AI optimist. However, we have to be realistic about the pros and cons of this new technology that we are unleashing on ourselves, okay? So don't get completely terrified when I put this up here, but in the short term, unfortunately, AI is going to be really bad news. Why? Because in this distraction economy that we live in, 70% of us, our own identity, our own sense of purpose comes through what? The thing that we wake up every day to do, our job, right? It's why when you meet somebody and they're like, hey, who are you? They're like, I'm a doctor. Wait, that's who you are? That's what you do, right? But we conflate that in this modern world that we've created for ourselves. We conflate what we do with who we are. What you do is not who you are, okay? It's not who you are, but 70% of us think that it is. And this is a problem because here, this is a quite enlightened crowd. I am honored to be speaking in front of all of you. Not everybody's really thinking of things these ways out there, okay? This is a problem, and McKinsey and others estimate that 400, 500 million jobs are going to be displaced. I sadly think that is probably true. I've yet to hear a coherent argument. Okay, yes, there will be new jobs that come about, but I've yet to hear a coherent argument about why AI can't do a lot of those new jobs too. Like, this is going to be an issue for us over the next few years, and sadly, this is going to decrease the amount of purpose that people feel, which is why at the top of this talk I said, I think purpose, spirituality is going to become the most valuable asset we have as humans over the next 5 to 10 years. So how do we get more of it if we're living in this distraction economy with AI taking a lot of our jobs? The good news is the same science that has shown us how spirituality and purposefulness impacts our brains, our bodies, our health, and our happiness has shown us what the key ingredients to spirituality are, the key ingredients to purpose are. And it's as easy as 1, 2, 3, okay? Every spiritual tradition in the world, every religion in the world, every secular practice in the world, in order to build that parietal cortex and transform your brain, needs to consist of 3 ingredients, right? These are the ingredients at the salad bar. You need one of each to have a salad, okay? One is reflection, some element of, you could do Stoic journaling, you could do meditation practices, you could do so many different ways to reflect, okay? But there has to be some element of introspection where you're evaluating your own self, your own emotions, your own strengths, and checking in on yourself regularly through reflection. Number two, there has to be some element of community. And again, I'm not talking about liking your friend's posts on Instagram. I'm talking about like actually doing a real, authentic act of friendship, community, compassion for another human being. Number three, you have to have some kind of practice of inspiration. You need to have something that inspires some deeper feeling of awe or meaning. So all of this in the course of your day could be as simple as, you know what, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to do a stoic journaling type of thing, I'm going to go to my soul cycle class to get the community kind of feel, and I'm going to go for a walk in the park to feel some connection with nature and just be like, wow, that bird song is amazing. That's cool, that's spiritual, that's purposeful, done. Check, check, check. It can be that easy, okay? It doesn't have to be religious, right? And that's very important because guess what? There are 4 billion people in the world who consider themselves spiritual. More and more of them every day are not religious. The tools, the rituals that our parents and grandparents have used for thousands of years in some cases aren't necessarily the tools and rituals that make sense for us. They're like nice looking articles of clothing that don't quite fit us in the modern world for many people. For many people they do, and that's amazing, right? But for an increasing number of people, they don't, which is why 60% of Americans today mix and match things, right? Oh, I was raised Catholic, but I like this Buddhist meditation stuff. I also go to yoga class, and I like to check my astrology. Cool. That's awesome, right? But that's the world that we're living in. There are billions of seekers in the world, and they're trying to, in a very challenging way, trying to figure out which of the thousands of traditions and practices in the world and which of the millions of communities and guides in the world makes sense for them. It's all pretty confusing, right? It adds a lot to this kind of like distraction world that we're living in. So solving this problem is one of the biggest problems we have to solve. And that's actually why we created Soul, is to try to solve that problem. And the way we think about Soul is we use AI, but AI is not the demiurge. We're not saying talk to AI and your AI is going to solve. No, your AI is your Jiminy Cricket. That's Soul. We think of Soul as a Jiminy Cricket. The same way that you guys know Pinocchio, right? Pinocchio had Jiminy Cricket on his shoulder to help him navigate through the world and become a real boy, right? We think of Soul as your little Jiminy Cricket that helps you navigate through the world and become a real spiritual being, a real spiritual, purposeful person, right? And what we do is there are thousands of traditions and practices, thousands of guides and communities and courses, thousands of reflective practices on Soul. It would be completely overwhelming if we just kind of gave you a wall of content. That's not what we try to do. And so what we try to do is we say, tell us your interests, tell us about your personality, tell us how you feel. And we're going to highlight the unique practice for you on a daily basis to just help you do that little checklist. Okay, you got a reflection, you got a connection, you got an inspiration, you're done for the day. Please go spend time with real human beings. Please join one of these communities. Please engage with these guides. These are the ones that make sense for you based on your own interests, your own personality, your own emotional state. Now, I'm saying this, folks, we're like just over a year old, okay? So we're a startup. Have we figured everything out perfectly? No. We are really fortunate. We've become the #1 spiritual app in the United States. We're a top 10 mental health app. We're growing very quickly. We seem to be providing a lot of value for spiritual seekers and guides. We're very proud of that, but we have a lot more to do and a lot more to learn. And what I would love for you all to do is to try it out and honestly, just give me your feedback. Like, we want to provide something that is of value to the world, of value to seekers and of guides. And so we need feedback in order to do that properly. And this audience here is particularly well positioned to provide very good feedback on what we're trying to do. So I'd ask that of you. This is how you can provide that feedback. Please feel free to download the app and check it out, or just go on the App Store or the Google Play Store and search for Spiritual or search for Soul, and it will be probably the top result. But in closing, I would just say, whether it's with Soul or some other tool or set of tools, please do yourself and your families and your children a favor and start building some kind of habit of purposefulness or spirituality or consciousness. Choose whatever word you want. try to build some habit of that daily reflection, daily connection, daily inspiration in your lives with whatever tool you want. Because I think that more than anything, AI can help us sort through all the options out there. AI, that's the benefit of AI. AI is also a challenge because it's going to displace a lot of jobs. But more than anything, I think AI is an opportunity, because if you look at the history of humanity, across every culture around the world, we have defined ourselves as some kind of triplicate being that consists of a mind, a body, and a soul or a spirit. Every culture around the world defines humans in that way. And we fooled ourselves for a few thousand years into thinking that we're special because of our body. Look at us, we're these tool makers, we got these opposable thumbs. We're so much better than like monkeys and stuff, right? Then we got a little bit smarter and we said, you know what? That's not what makes us special. What makes us special is our minds. We're so smart, so smart. We're the most intelligent species on Earth. More than anything, AI completely crushes those two arguments. We are no longer the smartest kid on the block, okay? And we're no longer the dominant tool maker. So what are we? I think what we've been all along, and what the age of AI will reveal to us finally, as a mirror that we hold up to ourselves, is that we are inherently spiritual, purposeful beings. We are spiritual, purposeful beings, and the thing that makes us human is our ability to connect with one another, as you talked about yesterday, to show compassion, to hug one another, to experience love, to experience inspiration. This is what makes us human. And my hope is that the age of AI will reveal that to ourselves and to all of humanity, finally, after thousands of years of trying. Thank you so much for listening.